Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to make the pie crust for a sweet ricotta pie. This pie crust is made with lard, and I went today to the butcher and I bought freshly rendered, this needs to be on something other than a white plate, but I'll show you in my hand, freshly rendered lard, because it tastes much better, is much fresher than what you can buy in the supermarket. And so in this bowl, what I have are 4½ cups of flour, 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and a teaspoon of baking powder. And that's all incorporated together. And again, I'm going to put this lard in here. I put the lard in the refrigerator so it's nice and cold. And I'm going to break this up into little bitty pieces and put it in here. I have here about 1.5 cups of lard. It's a lot of lard, but this makes two good-sized sweet ricotta pies. And the pie crust is unusual because it's got the sugar in it, so it's a little bit more difficult to work with. It gets sticky. It's much easier to work with when it's cold. So for sure we're going to put these into the refrigerator, the balls of this into the refrigerator and let them chill before we attempt to roll out this pie crust. So now I've got the lard in the bowl, and I'm going to use my pastry cutter to cut the lard into the flour, sugar, baking powder mixture. And we want again to make sure that we work quickly because we want the lard to stay cold. It's just like when you put butter into a crust, into the flour, you want it to make little pea-sized portions so that it's all really well incorporated into the flour. You don't want any big lumps of butter or lard any place. You want this to be well incorporated into the flour. Pastry cutter is really, really useful to get started, but then eventually I just get my fingers in there and kind of mush it around until I get those pea-shaped bits, and then I might go back to the pie cutter, the pastry cutter again to make sure that it's all incorporated. I don't know if you can see it, but it's really got pea-shaped pieces of flour and lard now. I'm going to do a little bit more with the pastry cutter, and we're trying not to mush that into there, but to keep it all this kind of separate little pea-shaped pieces of flour and lard. So that's pretty good, like that. And now what I'm going to do is, again, to make a well, and I have a little bowl with 3 eggs in it, and I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of vanilla into the eggs. I'm going to do that carefully. 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 1 and 2. Incorporate that into the egg, and then make our little well in the middle and pour the egg mixture in there, and then we're going to gradually try to incorporate the flour and lard mixture in like this. You want to get that egg all incorporated into here. My mother, this says 4½ cups of flour. My mother always said 5 cups of flour, but I keep that extra ½ cup out because I add that if the dough feels sticky. And I think this dough is going to need some extra flour because it is feeling sticky. It's probably why it's best to measure, or to weigh flour rather than to measure it by the cup. But of course, none of these old recipes have weights like that. They're all cups. In fact, my Aunt Nancy used to use a white coffee cup to make pasta and to make other things. And so when she said 4 cups of something, she meant 4 cups of that white coffee cup. So if you didn't have a coffee cup that was like that white coffee cup, you were out of luck. Your macaroni dough or pasta dough or pie crust was not going to taste like hers because you were using a measurement that was very different from hers. So now I've got some nice dough here. I'm going to make actually I want to make 3 balls of this because one ball, you need 2 balls for the bottom crust. This recipe makes 2 of these sweet ricotta pies. So you need 1 ball for each of the bottom crusts. And then for the top, it's not a 2-crust pie, but you make kind of ribbons and lay those across the top of the pie. Sort of like an open crusted pie. So there's 1 large ball, and I'm going to try to cut this into 2 even balls, and then take a little bit of each of those to set aside for the tops. Do that like this. That looks pretty even. And then I'm going to take a little bit. That's for those, the top part, and a little bit. So now we have 2 balls of dough, about like that. And these are definitely going into the refrigerator.